Her mother said her daughter's skin was glowing when she came home from her first training. She looked healthy, proud, more alive than ever. Months later, that same daughter walked into her bedroom, closed the door behind her, and just started crying. And she wouldn't say why. To understand how far she fell, you have to understand who she was before. Vanessa Guillen was 20 years old. She was born on September 30th, 1999, in Houston, Texas, one of 6 children in a big, close family of Mexican immigrant parents. Her mom and dad, Rogelio and Gloria, raised her devout and hardworking, and everyone who knew Vanessa describes the same girl, spunky, friendly, tough, and bursting with energy. She was athletic her whole life. Soccer and running were her world growing up. She competed, she pushed herself, and she carried that same drive into the classroom. She graduated high school in 2018 in the top 15% of her class. Smart, motivated, the kind of kid who set a goal and hit it. And the goal she set for herself was the Army. She wanted to serve. She was fiercely patriotic, and she didn't wait around. Right about the time she was finishing high school, she already knew. And that June following graduation, she applied. She enlisted, and she was thrilled. Her military job title was a 91F, a small arms and artillery repairer, and she got posted to Fort Hood, right there in Texas, close to home. For a kid from Houston who wanted to serve her country, this was everything she'd hoped for. But to grasp what that posting actually meant, you have to understand the size of the place she disappeared from.
Fort Hood is big. It's the Army's largest military installation. It's like the New York City.
Vanessa was a small arms repair soldier, so her responsibilities included ensuring weapons were maintained, helping with accountability and inventories. That was her job.
The largest military installation in the country. Cameras, checkpoints, gates, people everywhere. And in the middle of all of it, a 20-year-old private first class, proud to be there, keeping track of the weapons. At first, things went well. Vanessa was proud of herself, and her parents were proud of her too. She had done exactly what she said she'd do. She was a soldier. And then, in her final months, something started to change. Her family noticed it before she ever said a word. The bright, high-energy girl they knew was fading in front of them. She lost weight. She had bags under her eyes. She wasn't sleeping right. The spark that used to fill every room she walked into. It dimmed. She grew quiet, withdrawn. Sad in a way that didn't match the daughter who'd come home glowing after training. To the people who loved her most, it was unmistakable. Something was wrong. Her sister remembers the exact moment it broke through the surface. A single sentence, and then a closed door.
Yeah, forehead. I remember this one time she said, "I don't like it here. And I hope one day you understand."
Around October, knowing that my sister was coming home, I was there. And she just came in, she closed the door, and she just started crying on her.
I don't like it here, and I hope one day you understand. Think about that line coming from a girl who fought her way into the Army before she'd even graduated, who wanted this more than anything. Something had happened that she couldn't put into words, or wouldn't. She just shut the door and cried on her bed and left her family to fill in the blanks. Nobody sensed it more sharply than her mother. Vanessa and Gloria were extremely close. The kind of bond where a mom knows her child better than the child knows herself. And Gloria had that instinct, that deep motherly certainty that her daughter was in real trouble. It wasn't a guess. It was a feeling in her gut that wouldn't let go. About 3 weeks before Vanessa disappeared, Gloria said her daughter was just acting differently. Off, upset, carrying something heavy. She wasn't communicating right. She'd become a stranger version of herself. And Gloria kept pressing, the way only a mother can, because she refused to let it go. Eventually, she got it out of her. Vanessa admitted that she was being sexually harassed by one of the sergeants on the Fort Hood base, a man in her chain of command. Someone she couldn't get away from, because he was right there where she worked and lived every single day. She told her mom this sergeant had been stalking her, watching her while she worked out, making her feel unsafe in the one place she was supposed to be protected. It was eating at her mentally. It was the reason for the weight loss, the sleepless nights, the tears behind that closed door. And here's the part that breaks your heart. Vanessa would not give her mother the man's name. She knew exactly what would happen if she did. She knew Gloria would call, and fight and throw a fit and demand action, and Vanessa was scared of that. But it went deeper than fear of her mom making noise. When Gloria offered to report it for her, Vanessa told her no. She told her she knew other women in the Army who had reported situations just like this one, and the Army did nothing, didn't help them, didn't protect them, in a lot of cases, didn't even believe them. So she held the name inside, and she carried it alone. It was a day Vanessa wasn't even supposed to be working. It was going to be a normal day off, or close to it. But that morning, someone called her in. We still don't know who, and we still don't know why. But somebody reached out and told her she was needed at Fort Hood, and Vanessa went. She was that kind of soldier. You call, she shows up. And she wasn't dreading it. In her mind, this was going to be a short one. She figured she'd be off by the early afternoon, and she already had a plan for the rest of the day. She wanted to go hiking. That was the whole point of getting through the shift. A half day of work, then the outdoors, then home. This is the ordinary, harmless texture of the last morning of her life, and it's told best by the people who were on the other end of that last text.
The plan was to go hiking whenever she got off work, and she had suspected it was going to be a half day. The last time she texted me was that morning, and she just sent a screenshot of the weather. It said it was going to rain.
We know that Vanessa reported to her workstation, which was in the motor pool. And then we know that she came to the arms room, where she did leave behind her bank card, her ID card, and the keys to her barracks room and her...
Sit with that for a second, because every detail there matters. The last thing her family ever got from her wasn't a goodbye, wasn't a warning, wasn't anything ominous. It was a screenshot of the weather. Rain. A 20-year-old checking the forecast because she wanted to know if her hike was still on. That's the version of Vanessa that walked onto that base that morning. A girl making weekend plans. And then there's that second half. She reported to her workstation at the motor pool, like normal. But at some point, she moved to the arms room. The room where the weapons are kept, locked and logged and accounted for down to the serial number. And in that first arms room, she set down her things. Her bank card. Her Army ID. The keys to her barracks room. The keys to her car. Everything a person needs to actually leave a base. She put it all down, the way you do when you're stepping out for 5 minutes and coming right back. She never came back for any of it. From there, the morning becomes a trail of small movements between rooms. Vanessa was doing exactly what she was trained to do, confirming equipment, checking numbers, chasing down paperwork on a weapon that needed servicing. That work took her to a second arms room, the one being run that day by a specialist named Aaron Robinson. He was 20 years old, same as her. She came in to verify a serial number on a machine gun. Routine. The kind of thing that happens 100 times a day on a base that size and never means anything. Except this time, that room is the last place anyone can prove Vanessa Guillen was alive. And the timeline of what happened next is brutally, almost mockingly, short.
At 10:23, Vanessa sends a text message confirming the serial number of a machine gun. That's her last known communication. 50 minutes later, at 11:13 a.m., Robinson closes his arms room.
He said that she completed what she was supposed to do in the arms room. And
50 minutes. That's the entire window. At 10:23, she's texting a serial number, doing her job, alive and present and accounted for. And by 11:13, less than an hour later, Robinson is locking up and telling everyone that she finished her business and walked out. That's his story. She came, she confirmed the numbers, he handed her some paperwork and a serial number for a gun that needed work, and she left, headed off to the motor pool. As far as he was concerned, she was gone and fine. But here's the thing about she left. The people over at the motor pool were expecting Vanessa. They were waiting for her to show up, and she never did. She left one room, according to Robinson, and simply never arrived at the next one. In the space between two rooms on a base crawling with cameras and checkpoints and soldiers, she just evaporated. And Robinson? His story for the rest of that day is clean and simple. He says he finished his shift, left the base that night, and went home to the house he shared off base with his girlfriend, a woman named Cecily Aguilar. He says he was there all evening, just hanging out with her, nothing unusual. Then he came back to work the next morning, on time, 6:30 a.m., like a man with nothing to hide. That's the alibi. Home, girlfriend, bed, back to base. By the end of that day, here's what was true. Vanessa's bank card was still on base. Her ID was still on base. Her barracks keys and her car keys were still on base, sitting exactly where she'd left them. Everything Vanessa Guillen owned was accounted for. Everything except two things: Vanessa herself and her phone. Her family started calling. Hours passed with no answer, no callback, straight to voicemail every time. When her sister finally got through to someone at the base, the response was strangely, unnervingly calm. "We sent her for a report," they said, "but she never made it back." At 3 a.m. Myra drove to Fort Hood herself. The staff surgeon was asleep and told her to come back in the morning. Come back in the morning. Her little sister had vanished off a military base, and the response she got was basically, "We'll deal with it later." That should tell you everything about how the first hours of this case went. Because from the very beginning, the family was doing the Army's job for them. Vanessa and Myra were so close, and when Myra couldn't reach her, when nobody could give a straight answer about where she was, she and Vanessa's fiancé Juan just got in the car and went. They weren't going to sit at home and wait for a base full of trained investigators to call them back. They drove there themselves.
The family is not getting clear answers from the base about Vanessa's whereabouts.
So in a last-minute desperate move, Myra, her sister, and Juan, her fiancé, decide to make the drive to Fort Hood to try and get answers themselves about Vanessa.
I knew something was wrong because I checked her social media.
That's the part that gets me. It was the family checking her social media, the family piecing together that she'd gone quiet, the family panicking. They knew Vanessa. They knew she didn't just disappear. And here's what makes the early days so frustrating. The Army's default position was that she left. On her own. She was essentially treated as AWOL, like she just walked off and decided not to come back. But think about what she left behind. Vanessa's bank card, her Army ID, her keys, all of it stayed in that arms room. You don't run away from your entire life and leave your ID and your keys sitting on a table. Nobody just walks off a base with nothing. And yet that was the story the family kept bumping up against. She walked away. She'll turn up. Meanwhile, everything she owned said she never had the chance to walk anywhere. And it got messier, because early on there were conflicting witness reports. Soldiers who weren't even in her unit claimed to have seen Vanessa on the base later that afternoon, around 12:30, 1 o'clock. And those accounts sent CID chasing the wrong timeline right out of the gate. If people are swearing they saw her walking around at 1 in the afternoon, then investigators aren't looking at what happened that morning. It threw the whole thing off, and those are exactly the kinds of statements that would later start to fall apart. But in those first crucial days, it muddied everything. So the family did what the Army wasn't doing. They made posters. They drove to gas stations. They handed out flyers. They went to the media. They started DMing people. That's actually how a lot of us first heard about this case, because Vanessa's people were out there refusing to let her name go quiet. And it worked, slowly. The story started leaking out past the gates of Fort Hood and into the news.
At this point, I start seeing these posts, and I was just thinking, why haven't we been on alert that there is a missing soldier? And that evening, I reported on the fact that Vanessa was missing. Private First Class Vanessa Guillen was last seen on Wednesday.
Why haven't we been on alert? That's a reporter asking the exact question the family had been screaming for days. A soldier is missing off the largest military base in the country, and the alarm is being raised by a journalist who saw it on social media. Not by the base. Not by an official channel. By the internet, because the family made sure the internet couldn't look away. And that's really when the Find Vanessa movement took off. Her family and her supporters didn't just want awareness. They wanted answers, and they wanted them loud. So they took it straight to the source. Every single Friday, they showed up outside the east gate of Fort Hood, and they protested.
From the Army. So they start holding protests outside the east gate of Fort Hood.
We started protesting every Friday.
What do we want?
Everyone is wondering, why would Vanessa go?
Why would Vanessa go missing? That was the question hanging over all of it. And it wasn't just why. It was how. Because this is Fort Hood, the largest military base in the entire country. There are cameras everywhere. There are checkpoints. There are people at every gate, at every turn. You don't walk on and off that base without being seen and logged and recorded. And nobody saw Vanessa leave. There was no footage of her walking out. There was no camera catching her at a gate. Everything about that base said she never left it, and everything about who she was said she never would have. The pressure kept building. A $15,000 reward went up for any information. Then it climbed to $25,000. Then the League of United Latin American Citizens matched it and pushed the total to $50,000. There were billboards. There were petitions. The whole country was starting to ask the same question this family had been asking since night one. And here's what it came down to. The Army looked at Vanessa and saw a soldier who ran off. Her family looked at that arms room and saw a crime scene. Two completely different stories, and only one of them was going to be true. The difference was, this family refused to be quiet until somebody proved them wrong. Then, nearly a month in, two witnesses finally came forward with something no one had bothered to chase down. They said they'd seen Aaron Robinson wheeling a heavy, tough box out of his arms room and struggling to load it into his car. Why would a man who was supposedly home all night, hanging out with his girlfriend, call that same girlfriend over and over in the middle of the night? You don't dial someone who's sitting right next to you. That single question is where this whole case starts to come apart, and it doesn't come apart because of a witness or a confession. It comes apart because of a phone. By this point, more than a month has gone by, and investigators keep circling back to the last person known to have seen Vanessa alive. Specialist Aaron Robinson, 20 years old, the soldier managing the second arms room she walked into to check serial numbers. He'd given his story. He helped her read off some numbers, handed her paperwork, assumed she was headed to the motor pool. Then, he said, he left the base that night and went home to his girlfriend, Cecily Aguilar, and just stayed in. Nothing unusual. A quiet evening. But when police pulled his cell phone records, the quiet evening stopped making sense.
While everyone's asking questions about Vanessa, Army investigators realize via cell phone records that the day that Vanessa went missing, Specialist Robinson has called his girlfriend
over and over. Several calls, and not a couple of rings that dropped to voicemail. Calls that ran minutes long. If the two of them were together all night the way he claimed, why does the phone show him reaching for her again and again? A man doesn't repeatedly call the person sitting on the couch beside him. So investigators went to Cecily directly and asked her the obvious thing. Why was your boyfriend blowing up your phone all night if he was right there with you? And she had an answer ready. She'd lost her phone, she said, a few times, actually. And that's why he kept calling it, to help her find it. Now, we've all done that. You call the missing phone, you listen for the buzz, you hang up. But that's the problem. You hang up. These weren't 10-second calls. These were minutes. Nobody stays on the line for minutes listening to a phone ring in the couch cushions. Her story covered the calls, but it didn't cover how long they lasted, and that little gap is the loose thread. There's another wrinkle underneath all of this, one that mattered later. Cecily wasn't single. She was married to another soldier, a man named Keon, while she was seeing Robinson. So there was already a secret to protect, already a reason for these two to keep their movements quiet. Keep that in your back pocket, because the Army would try to build a whole motive out of it down the line. To get the truth out of Robinson's phone, investigators used what's called a universal forensic extraction device. It pulls everything off a phone. Physical and logical data, all of it. Every text, every photo, every deleted scrap. And critically, it pulls GPS. Location history. Where the phone was and when. A person can lie to your face all day. The phone in his pocket keeps its own record, and that record doesn't care about his alibi. So they read the map his phone drew that night, and it did not lead to his living room.
Words now, foul play. And they are looking at potential criminal activity having occurred.
I was like, well, about time they said it. We've been knowing since when it first happened, because nothing makes sense. Nothing.
He says he was home. His phone says he was standing on a bridge over the Leon River at 2 a.m, 30 minutes from base. Those two things cannot both be true. And it didn't stop at the bridge. From that spot near the water, investigators tracked his phone moving north along the Leon River for 2 solid hours, not passing through, moving up and down a riverbank in the dead of night. And when they checked Cecily's phone, it showed the exact same pattern, the exact same path, at the exact same time. Whatever her story about lost phones, her device puts her right there beside his, out by the river, at 2 a.m. That's when her second version came out. Pressed on the inconsistencies, she dropped the lost phone excuse and said, Actually, the two of them had gone for a drive. Stargazing out in Belton, Texas. Something she liked to do when she was stressed. Just a couple looking at the stars, then home. But the GPS doesn't describe stargazing. Stargazing is one spot. This was 2 hours of tracing a riverbank. So on June 21st, searchers went to the Leon River, to the stretch his phone kept returning to. And they found things. The remains of a burned plastic container. A lid, scorched. An obvious burn pile. A patch of soil that had been freshly disturbed, dug up, and put back. And rising off of it, the smell investigators know and dread. The scent of decomposition. Everything that says a body was here. Everything except the body itself. Not yet. Think about where that leaves things. The phone put Robinson and Cecily together on a riverbank at 2 a.m. on the very night Vanessa vanished. The exact ground where searchers now stood smelling death in the dirt. Her alibi was gone. His alibi was gone. And confronted with a timeline his own phone had built against her, Cecily's whole story began to collapse. Days later, it stopped being about smells and disturbed soil. A crew of contractors, out fixing a fence near that same river, found what the searchers had walked past. Human remains, dusted with lime. They had been dating 2 months. 2 months. And on the night of April 22nd, Aaron Robinson called Cecily Aguilar and told her that he had bludgeoned a female soldier to death on the Fort Hood base. And then he asked her to help him get rid of the body. And she said yes. For weeks, Cecily had been feeding police a story. She lost her phone, that's why he kept calling. Then it was a long drive to clear her head, some stargazing out in Belton, Texas. But once investigators started laying the inconsistencies on the table, the calls that ran for minutes, the GPS that put both of their phones in the exact same place at 2:30 a.m, the story fell apart. So on June 30th, they brought her back in. And this time, Cecily cracked and told them everything. Here's what she said happened. On April 22nd, Aaron killed Vanessa inside the arms room with a hammer. After she was dead, he put her body into that tough box. The heavy industrial container witnesses said they saw him struggling to lift into his car, and he drove her off the base. Then he picked Cecily up from her job at the gas station, and the two of them drove out to the Leon River. She said that when they got there, the box was already waiting. Aaron had brought it out ahead of time, and when he opened it up, Vanessa was inside. He told Cecily he needed help getting rid of her, and she decided to help him. I cannot stress this enough. 2 months. Why would you do that for someone you have known for 2 months? Not that there is ever a reason to do this for anyone, ever. But that level of loyalty to a man you barely know over the body of a murdered woman? It is beyond me. Cecily told police that to get rid of Vanessa, they dismembered her, and they tried to burn her. But the fire kept getting bigger and bigger, and they got scared the smoke would give away their location, that someone would come. So they stopped. And instead, they dug 3 holes, and they buried Vanessa in 3 separate holes near the river. And it did not end there. A few days later, in between what she was calling photo shoots on her Instagram, Cecily went back to the Leon River with Aaron. This time, they brought concrete that she had picked up off of Facebook Marketplace. They dug up what was left of Vanessa, they tried to burn her a second time, and then they put her remains back in those holes and poured concrete over the top. Then they went home, burned their clothes, and cleaned up like nothing had ever happened. And she kept posting. That is the part I truly cannot get past. 2 days after Vanessa disappeared, Cecily posted a selfie captioned, "The most dangerous woman of all is the one who refuses to rely on you to save her." She posted, "People who fight fire with fire end up getting the ashes of their own integrity." She posted, "I loved her," the dark side of her. She wrote about demons that dance, about madness, about black being her favorite color. A normal human being would have nightmares after what she did. She was posing for the camera and quoting poetry about darkness. Everything Cecily was describing lined up exactly with where Aaron's phone had gone that night.
Guillen's family. Her remains were found near the Leon River. Specialist Robinson's cell phone had pinged to that area the night Vanessa went missing.
The ping and the grave were the same place. His phone put him on that riverbank the night she vanished, and that riverbank is exactly where they pulled her out of the ground. That is not a coincidence anyone can explain away. At this point, Aaron was already a suspect being held in his room on base, and he had no idea Cecily was talking. So police did something smart. They had her call him while they listened in. She walked back through everything the two of them had done, step by step. And Aaron did not deny a single piece of it. He agreed to all of it. They also had his text messages, where he was sending her news articles about remains being found. And on one of those calls, he said it out loud. "Baby, they found the pieces." That confession answered the question this whole case had been built on. How does a soldier go missing on the largest military base in the country, with cameras and checkpoints and people everywhere? She didn't walk out. She left sealed inside a box, off the record, carried out by a man who had a second person ready and willing to help erase her.
Rid of the body.
The pair allegedly dismembered Vanessa's body and covered her remains with concrete. The details so disturbing, her family decides not to tell Vanessa's mother exactly what happened.
Y no me decían nada porque no podían decirme nada, porque me decían que podía yo morir. Nada.
On the day the remains were found, Robinson was kept under watch on Fort Hood by an unarmed escort.
An unarmed escort. That is what stood between Aaron Robinson and the outside world on the day they pulled Vanessa's remains out of the ground. He was supposed to be confined to his room. He was supposed to be watched. But he was sitting there with his phone in his hand, watching the news reports roll in about the pieces they had found, and he already knew what he was about to do. So by this point, Cecily has confessed. She's called Aaron while the police listened in, and he agreed to everything. Didn't deny a single detail. They've got their man. Aaron is now considered a suspect, and he's being held in his room at Fort Hood, not allowed to leave the base. And here's the part that still doesn't make sense to a lot of people. The prime suspect in a murder. A man who they now know bludgeoned a woman to death, dismembered her, and buried her in 3 holes by a river, was being watched by a single unarmed escort. That's it. One guy, no weapon. And somehow, on June 30th, Aaron got past him. Witnesses say he slipped away and fled the base in a vehicle, with the guard chasing after him. Think about that. This is the largest, most high-tech military base in the entire country. Cameras everywhere, checkpoints, people at every gate. The same base where investigators kept insisting Vanessa couldn't possibly have walked out unseen, and yet the man accused of killing her drove right off of it. He was on the run for a couple of days. Then on July 2nd, they tracked him down, found him walking on the street. And when police approached him, Aaron pulled out a gun and shot himself right there on the spot. He died. And I'm sorry, but that is a coward. He knew he was screwed. He knew the evidence was stacking up against him. The tough box, the GPS, the phone calls, the text messages where he sent Cecily news articles about remains being found, the phone call where he literally told her, "Baby, they found the pieces." He knew. And he was too much of a bitch to actually face what he had done. So he took his own life instead and disappeared into nothing. No trial, no answers, no accountability. And the very next day, the Army held a press conference. Now listen to what they chose to say.
Robinson now dead. Army officials say at a press conference the next day that while the criminal investigation into Vanessa's murder continues, they have no evidence that Robinson ever sexually harassed her.
We don't know what the motive was with regard to Specialist Robinson killing Vanessa. We may never know. He may have taken that motive with him to his grave.
He may have taken that motive to his grave. Do you hear how convenient that is? The one man who could tell us why is now conveniently dead, and the Army's official position is basically a shrug. No evidence he ever harassed her. This is a woman who told her mother she was being harassed, who told her family a sergeant was stalking her, watching her while she worked out, that it was destroying her mentally, who her family says was about to file a report right before she vanished. And the Army's response, one day after the only suspect kills himself, is to publicly cast doubt on the exact thing she was too afraid to report. To her mother, to her sister, that landed like a slap in the face. But there's a bigger question that press conference didn't answer, and reporters weren't going to let it go, because the escape itself makes no sense.
On the day that Vanessa's remains were found, Specialist Robinson is put under the watch of an unarmed escort. How does the prime suspect in Vanessa's disappearance escape from a military base, somehow get a hold of a gun, and then kill himself?
That's part of what we've asked General Murray to look at in his investigation as to what action.
That is the question. How? How does the number one suspect in a murder, a guy who's supposed to be confined to his room on base, get out, get off the base, and get his hands on a gun? When they later asked the Army about the weapon, they said it was his personal gun. Okay, but they still won't explain how he had access to a gun-off base when he was supposed to be locked down in the first place. It's the same base that couldn't lose one soldier on camera, but somehow lost track of the one man they most needed to hold on to. And the timing is almost too clean. The day Vanessa's remains are found is the day he slips away. Meanwhile, there's still one suspect left alive, Cecily Aguilar. She's arrested and taken to the Bell County Jail, held without bond, and charged federally with conspiracy to tamper with, mutilate, or conceal evidence, helping Aaron dismember and hide Vanessa's body. She's facing up to 20 years. And when she appears before a judge, she pleads not guilty. Not guilty. This is the woman who, by her own confession to police, helped burn a body, helped dig 3 holes, went home and burned her clothes, then came back days later to pour concrete over what was left. And in between all of it was posting selfies about how the darkness is what made him fall for her. Not guilty. So here's where we stand. The killer is dead by his own hand, taking the answer to why with him. The only living suspect is pleading not guilty in a county jail. And the institution that was supposed to protect Vanessa is standing at a podium telling the world there's no evidence she was ever harassed at all. To her family, none of it added up. And every piece of it hardened a suspicion that had been growing since the very first night. This wasn't just an army failing to answer questions. This was starting to look like an army covering something up. While they were dragging the Leon River for Vanessa, they found somebody else first. Not her. A man. A Fort Hood soldier who had been gone for almost a year and whose name nobody in the country knew because the Army had already decided he wasn't missing at all. They had filed him away. They had a word for it, and the word closed the case.
He's a Fort Hood soldier who had been missing for almost a year. He had been listed as a deserter, and sadly, now he's found murdered.
Gregory's personality was very carefree. Anything to do with fun, that was him.
Gregory Weedle Morales went missing August 2019. His family was told, we as reporters were told, he was AWOL. And that means that he left on his own.
Wall. He left on his own. That's the label. And once it's on your file, nobody looks for you. Gregory Morales disappeared in August of 2019, and the story his family got was that he'd simply walked off. A deserter, a man who couldn't handle the Army. So for almost a year, no one searched. And then investigators went hunting for Vanessa near that river, and Gregory turned up murdered. Think about what that means. He wasn't found because the Army was looking for him. He was found by accident because they were looking for her.
I mean, to sit there and just cry in front of your students.
The gruesome discovery was made as the search for missing Fort Hood soldier Private First Class Vanessa Guillen drags on. If they were not looking for Vanessa, they would not have found Gregory. Point blank.
If they were not looking for Vanessa, they would not have found Gregory. Point blank. And that's the sentence that turned this from one girl's murder into something much bigger. Because now people are asking, how many Gregorys are there? How many soldiers got stamped, walked off on their own, and quietly forgotten when the truth was something nobody at Fort Hood wanted to chase down? Vanessa's disappearance didn't just expose the man who killed her. It forced the whole country to look at everything the Army had been filing away in a drawer marked, "Not our problem." And when they finally did look, really look, what came back was ugly. An independent review of Fort Hood found agents who were inexperienced, thrown into serious cases they weren't ready for. It found there was essentially no real protocol for a missing soldier, no urgency, no system. It found cameras on the largest military base in the country that weren't even working. And it found that complaints of sexual harassment were being treated as misconduct, a slap on the wrist, a paperwork problem, instead of the crime that it is. Remember, Vanessa was telling her mother she was scared to report, that she'd seen what happened to women who did. This is the machine she was afraid of. And this is the machine that told her family, over and over, that everyone on base was accounted for. That's the part the family can't let go of. Because the accountability check, the daily count that's supposed to confirm every soldier is safe and present, came back that day saying Vanessa was fine. She was already dead in a tough box. And later, the soldier responsible for that check admitted he'd been lazy. He said he saw her. He never saw her. He just checked the box. So the Army's official record said Vanessa Guillen was safe on the very day her body was being carried off the base. And the family kept asking the questions nobody would answer. Who called Vanessa in to work that day when she wasn't even supposed to be there? Where's the hammer? The weapon Aaron used, that vanished, that he claimed he had no idea about, until it came out he'd thrown it from a moving car window. Every thread they pulled, the Army had already tucked away. Every question landed on a shrug, so the family stopped waiting for the Army to care and made the whole country care instead.
When the sexual harassment allegations became public, the whole case took off.
Hashtag Find Vanessa Guillen began trending. And when I say trending, I mean even with celebrities.
Now actress Salma Hayek is using her star power to raise awareness about a missing Fort Hood soldier.
It took off. Salma Hayek, Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia, murals painted on walls in Houston and beyond, marches on City Hall, marches all the way to Washington, and then a hashtag that became a floodgate. I am Vanessa Guillen, where women who'd worn the same uniform started telling their own stories, the harassment, the assaults, the reports that went nowhere. Thousands of them. Vanessa's name became the sentence they'd all been afraid to say out loud. Out of that came the fight for the I Am Vanessa Guillen Act, a law to create a third-party channel, a way for soldiers to report assault and harassment without having to go straight to the people they're accusing. The family demanded a congressional investigation into how Fort Hood handled all of it. Houston declared a Vanessa Guillen Day. A 20-year-old private first class became a movement. But here's where it still sits. The man who could name the motive is dead by his own hand. The Army says it may never truly know why. And the family keeps repeating the one question no press conference, no review, no hashtag has ever actually answered. How do you go missing on a military base? What was done to Vanessa is documented. Why it was allowed to happen is still an open file.